This content may be upsetting, disturbing, or traumatic for some viewers, so I just wanted to give a heads up. Thank you.
Mothers, don't you know the pain you've caused your sons? Daddies, don't you know some hurts can't be undone? So be careful what you sow, they gonna reap it soon. Just be careful or they'll end up just like you. Mothers, hold your daughters and your sons. Fathers, show your children how to love. You gotta take their hands to lift them up again. Love your children, love your children.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Legacy Trauma Creates. In this episode, we will focus on how trauma affects the brain, and we will discuss the experiences of parents with trauma raising children. We will begin our episode by discussing a study by Isabel Mansui, a researcher that her and her team conducted on mice. Mansui began exploring how trauma affects future generations, and her team began separating the mother mice and putting them into stressful situations. They observed that upon return to their babies, they would often ignore them and would be frantic and distracted. This resulted in creating stress in the pups. They weren't surprised to discover that as the pups became adults, they showed signs of altered behaviors. However, what they did find that was surprising to them was that the children of those adults still showed the altered behaviors, although they had never experienced trauma. Concerned that this was a result of the traumatized mice reenacting the neglect that they went through as a pup, they began focusing only on the traumatized males mating with untraumatized females. Then all the males were removed from their mother's cage so that their behavior could not impact the offspring that they will come to have. After weaning the mice, they were then placed into mixed groups to prevent the litter mates from reinforcing each other's behavior. They completed these trials, sometimes going into the 6 generations, and they observed that the symptoms in the descendants were similar to the animals that were initially traumatized. The symptoms present in the descendants of the stressed fathers took more high-risk behaviors, and in difficult or stressful situations, they showed depressive-like behaviors and gave up sooner. Michael Meany of McGill University agreed with Mansui that a parent's experiences can influence a child's process of development. While conducting his own studies on mice, he noticed the offspring can have different epigenetic effects on brain development based on the levels of maternal care. I wanted to share this study because it shows that trauma leaves a mark within a family line. Both DNA and the environment you were raised in plays a critical role in the outcome of who you could become after enduring trauma. Laverne Cox in Hurt People, Hurt People talks about how her grandfather was born on a plantation, and as he grew up, he was beaten to make him work. And over time, it became deeply traumatizing. And not only that, he began to physically abuse her grandmother. She says that he passed on his trauma to his children, traumatizing them greatly, including Laverne's own mother, who ended up being emotionally abusive to her growing up. In Unlearning Shame and Remembering Love, Yolo Akili Robinson reflected on how the shame in his own internal voice mirrored the shame of his own fathers. Yolo said, "Shame unhealed is an intergenerational curse." I agree with that statement 100%. And I would also like to just go a step further and say anything unhealed will bleed into the next generation if not attended to quickly. I say this because during my research, I saw that adjusting to parenthood while holding on to trauma presents various challenges. To be honest, it was an eye-opener because I realized that a lot of the things that I was dealing with when my children were a lot younger were these challenges. And it was kind of a relief knowing that unfortunately it was normal, but it was normal that I wasn't going crazy. The experiences can leave you feeling raw because you're juggling your past pains and your child futures at the same time. Effects from trauma does tend to impact your emotional, physical, cognitive, behavior, social, and developmental areas of a person's life. Parents trying to balance these things without help may feel the demands of parenthood may be unbearable. Children require many needs and require a parent to give much of themselves. On the other hand, the parent may want to fulfill the needs of their children, but they are truly deficient in those areas. Aaron Emanuel said, parents may be caught off guard when their child cries, requests for more food, and clinging behaviors recall of their own unmet needs for more comfort, safety, and attunement throughout their childhoods. Reading that quote reminded me of a time when I was holding on to a lot of pain and I didn't even know how to formulate what I was feeling. I didn't have the word trauma for it. Like I didn't know it was trauma. Like, to be honest, I didn't even know what the word depressed was at one point until my friend asked me. She was like, Monique, are you depressed? And I was like, what is that? Like, I don't know this word. I just knew I was hurting in ways that I didn't always have words for. And hearing my daughter cry would be one of the most uncomfortable things for me. It was around a time when me and her dad separated, and she was trying to process, and she was just crying a lot. And I honestly didn't know what to do with her tears. I didn't know what to do at all. And I kind of fell back into one of those moments where I kind of sucked up my own tears and kept it moving. But hearing her cry, it just made me realize that I didn't feel like I had a freedom to cry. Like, maybe sure when I'm by myself, but like throughout the day, I don't have that. I have to keep pushing. I have to keep moving. Like, these kids got to be taken care of. These bills got to get done. Like, I still got to get to work. They still have needs, yada, yada, yada. And just hearing her cry would undo me in a way that I didn't know how to process. But I wanted to give her that freedom to cry. Like, I didn't feel like I had that. And I know the pain of parents separating. So I know how devastating that can be. And at the time, she was like 4. And I just remember when my dad and my stepmom had separated, I was about 8. And I felt like there was no one I could really talk to about it. And even though I wanted to cry, like, the information that was coming to me and just the things that I saw and the things that I witnessed, like, my tears became anger. And instead of crying, I just became very angry. And to be honest, for a long time, I didn't know how to cry unless I was angry. Like, the only time I could cry was like when I was pissed. And like, that's when the tears would like come out of my eyes. But like, I had to get to that point. So like I didn't know how to really cry, and I didn't know how to handle her tears. I remember around that time trying to explain to her and her brothers the best way that you can to a 3, 4, and 5-year old, why their dad won't be living with them anymore. And I know the cop out of I'll tell you when you're older. Like, maybe someone else doesn't feel that way, but for me personally, I feel like I'll tell you when you're older is a cop out. And sometimes maybe it's not. Maybe you just don't have the words. Because like I said, I didn't have the words. And I tried to explain it the best way that I could. And there were times when I was like, hey, I'm going to explain it to you this way, but ask me again when you're older. Because there's certain things that's kids shouldn't know. Like one of the things, the reasons I had such a difficult time with my dad and my stepmom separating is because I knew too much. Like, there are certain things a kid should not know until they're able to process that. And at 8, there was a lot of things that I couldn't process. I really couldn't understand. Like, I shouldn't have known. And I wanted to handle her emotions delicately. The intention was there. The end results of just I need to rethink my thoughts. So I wanted to handle her emotions with care. I didn't grow up seeing emotions handled well. I didn't grow up seeing people talk things out. Even when it came to the way I felt, like as a kid, just with adults, like how I felt sometimes for the most part, it got brushed off. It got brushed off a lot. And so trying to make sure that I took care of my children's emotions at that time, it was difficult. I remember just trying to comfort her with hugs. And I was not a physical touch kind of person. Like, to be honest, I was finally at a point where I didn't mind holding my kids' hands for long periods of time. Like, I know with my son is just like, and with any kid, when you're walking outside, it's like, hold my hand. And I would do that, but like, sometimes he would just want to hold my hand. And I'm like, why you want to do that for? Like, what is that? And after a while, I got used to it. But I know around this time, oh man. Dang. Around this time, like my daughter, she needed hugs. And I had a limit on how comfortable I can give someone a hug. It was like, oh, I love you. But after a while, it's like, all right, you gotta go. And she was hurting. Her dad, not only did we separate, but he didn't want to come see him. He didn't want to talk to him on the phone. He wanted nothing to do with them. So, going from seeing her dad every day to him disappearing, she didn't understand. And she wanted comfort. And when she would hug me, it would be hard. And I would literally be like, all right, okay, that's enough. Vaughn, you're being leechy. You're being leechy. You gotta get off me. Okay. And like literally, I just kind of like pry her off of me. And I'm like, dang, like I literally call my daughter a leech. I call her a parasite. And that's painful when I think about it. Because it's like, that was not my intention. And I never meant it in a bad way when I said it. But looking back on it now, it was just like, that was pain talking. That was definitely pain talking. Because, like, even now, to this day, I can do general hugs, but like, if I'm hurting, it's very difficult for me to hug people. Like, it is very difficult for me to hug people. And I know very recently, actually, like I was just really hurting, like really bad. And my friend, I didn't even know she was coming down here, and she came and she showed up to where I was, and she just hugged me and like wouldn't let me go. And I was like, all right, that's good, you can stop. And she's like, no, I'm not gonna let you go. And like, I just kind of broke a little bit in her arms. And that really made me realize that hugs are difficult for me when I'm hurting. And now I make sure that with my kids, I'm the last one to let go. And that's not out of like insecurity or never wanting to again. It's just that I love them so much. And when they're hurting, I will hold you for as long as you need me to. Because I remember a time when you needed that from me and I couldn't do it. And there were reactions from that. Like, I don't even know if they fully process it, but like my older two kids, for a long time, they didn't really want hugs. They didn't really want hugs. They didn't want any form of like physical affection. Like, by the time I really caught on to what I was doing, they were not as old as they are now, but definitely it was a process. And so like, I know with my son, he's 13, and part of it is because he's 13 and he's like, oh, mom. But for a long time, he didn't want hugs. He would be like, no, thank you. I'm okay. I'm fine. And so like now I'll be like, would you like a hug? And he's like, yeah. And he'll hug me. Or like I'll be doing something and he's like, I would like a hug. I'll hug you. And my daughter, she's quick to be like, I don't want a hug right now. And I was like, that's fine. I'll respect that. I appreciate it. Just know if you need one, I'm here. And like usually not long after, she'll come back and be like, can I have a hug? Yes, you can. And I just open my arms and hug her. And my youngest son, he just loves affection. He loves affection. And when I think about it, it just makes me think about how, even though I had them all kind of back to back, there were parts of my trauma that he didn't have to endure. He didn't have to deal with. He didn't have to face. By the time I think his memories like really began kicking in and he started becoming aware of things and situations, our household wasn't as toxic. I was in a better place mentally, emotionally, even physically, actually. And he got to experience sooner what my other two children didn't. Yeah. During that time, I made a lot of mistakes. I still make some. But I'm learning. My kids are forgiving. And we're all learning together. So to continue on with the other information. Aaron also goes on to mention how certain situations can lead to panic as well as traumatic remembering. This can also lead to your emotions flaring, increased heart rate, tightening in the chest, restlessness, and muscular tension. Other studies have shown that it can be difficult to regulate and express your emotions. And people of childhood trauma struggle with emotional distress. Another result of their trauma is that their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, no longer functions properly. They begin to develop false alarms that are triggered more easily and gives the impression of danger when there is none. The commonly known danger responses are fight, flight, and freeze, but there are also two more: flop and fawn. Fight is when you fight or protest against an attacker. Flight is when you try to hide or move away from an attacker. When you freeze, it means that you're unable to move or that you feel paralyzed in place. When a person flops, they just follow the instructions of the person that's harming them without protest. A person that fawns tries to please the one that's harming them. Even after the traumatic event is over, a person can still live with these effects with little to no control over it. The brain continues to send these signals to the body and tells it that it's still in danger. This allows the traumatic experience to be felt throughout the body and create flashbacks to replay in the mind. And when these flashbacks takes place, the right side of the brain lights up, but the left side deactivates. This part of the brain is also called the medial prefrontal cortex. The right side of the brain is responsible for nonverbal communication, and the left controls analytical, sequential, and linguistic thinking. When the left side of the brain is deactivated, it weakens the ability to organize events into logical sequences and to explain the changing emotions and perceptions into words. Without this, cause and effects becomes difficult to explain, and a person is unable to identify the long-term effects of a decision or create rational plans. The lack of activation in this area also leads to aimlessness. The people lose their sense of direction and their purpose. In extreme cases, this also impairs victims of childhood trauma from recognizing themselves in a mirror. And The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk said that the brain scans showed that the structures in charge of self-recognition were knocked out along with structures related to self-experience. This, along with staring absently, minds going blank, long periods of silence, monotonous voice, becoming numb during a traumatic event, or responses that don't connect with the situation or topic at hand, are signs of disassociating from the trauma. These dissociations can lead to depersonalization and derealization. Depersonalization is when a person feels as though they are watching themselves at a distance, as a spectator, and derealization is when the feeling of what is happening doesn't seem real, or it feels unfamiliar. Often during realization, the size of items seem irregular to their actual proportions. When a person's response is depersonalization, almost every part of their brain blanks out, and in the moment, they can't think, feel strong emotions, remember, or understand what's happening around them. I lived in a state of disassociation, both as a child, managing in a traumatic household, and as an adult in a toxic relationship and mothering 3 children. As a child, I would try to imagine I was somewhere else a lot. Like I really had active imagination. Really early on, my dad and my stepmom, they would be physically fighting a lot. So I would often just imagine I was somewhere else, at my grandmother's house or in one of my favorite fantasy novels. For me, the world of fiction was probably like my best friend. Like all these incredible worlds and places, I would just daydream that I was in them, anywhere but there. And I just didn't want to hear the sounds. I didn't like the arguments. I didn't like hearing fists hit flesh. If you never heard the sound, it's not a sound you want to hear. I think due to this, I don't really have like a consistent flow of memories from around that time. There are, I remember my dad was telling me about a time where pretty much a bottle of pills were taken, not by me, and someone had to be thrown into an ice bath. And I was there and I witnessed it. And I was like, Dad, I don't remember. And he was like, are you sure? Because like you were there and you did this and this. And I'm like, I don't remember. I don't have that memory. Like I was probably there, but like it's gone. Like it's not in my head anymore. And so like when he told me that, like it makes me wonder like how much of my memories are gone. But like I don't have them because when things were happening, I was in a faraway place. And I think this also became it was a coping mechanism. But as I got older, I realized that my mind would often go blank, like especially if I became overwhelmed or felt pressure. Like either my mind would go blank and I can just tune anyone out. Like I can hear what you're saying and process it. But at the same time, it's like it means nothing to me. Like I hear you, but I don't really hear you. And another thing was like I went numb. Like I couldn't feel. It was hard to feel. And I want to say I'm grateful for people who took notice of me and when it came to writing, because writing was one of the few times that I would allow myself to feel. Like, it was easier to feel when I was writing poetry. But other than that, it's just, I kind of walked in like this place of numbness. Some days were better than others, but most of the time I just thought there was something wrong with me. Like, I would get in trouble, like when my dad and my second stepmom were talking to me about stuff like that. Just different things when they were trying to have like a serious parental conversation with me, or if I did something, or if I didn't do something, then I would try to focus, but I just kind of would numb out or blank out. And it got to a point where like my stepmom would always be like, there you go again, giving me that nonchalant look. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, what do you want me to say? I don't have anything to say. Like, a lot of times I didn't speak because I felt like I wasn't being heard anyway. So if I didn't feel like I was being heard or going to be heard, why waste my words? But a lot of times I just felt that something was wrong with me. Like, I couldn't really feel, and I wanted to feel some type of emotion. Most days I was just kind of like, I'm here, I exist. And it's not that I didn't feel moments of happiness. I would say that I did, but I wouldn't say like I felt joy. And one of the ways I differentiate the two is that happiness is circumstantial. Joy is regardless of situation. Like, right now, regardless of whatever is happening around me, I can find joy in the moment, and just whatever. Happiness, sure, you give me like a glazed donut twist. Oh, that is a moment of pure bliss. That is happiness. Thank you. I love glazed twists. But even if someone was to tell me they would get that for me and never do, I could still find joy. Well, thank you for the thought. I appreciate it. But yes, and in those moments, I felt happiness and I felt love. But especially when it came to love, like, I always felt like it was surface level. And I remember like my great grandma died when I was like 14. And it was just really hard for me to cry for her. Like, I was sad that she was gone. But like, I loved that woman. And yet I just felt numb. Like, I couldn't cry. And I wanted to cry. I felt sad, but I was just like, she was old. She's gone. It sucks. But I couldn't cry like I wanted to. If anything, like, anger came in at my mom because she ended up getting us to the funeral late. I was just very angry. Like, angry was the one emotion that would just rise up. I didn't always want to feel that, but yeah. And for a long time, like, I was like, I don't want kids. Like, I don't want to be like my parents. Like, I don't want to be like my parents. I don't know. Like, I wanted to be the fun aunt. And I ended up being the one with the kids. And I was really concerned that I would be able to love my kids in the way that they deserve, especially since it felt like everyone I love was just kind of surface level. And when they got here, it didn't feel unnatural to love them. It I would say at sometimes it was very easy to just look into their cute little faces and just be like, oh, I love you. And then other times it was very difficult. I didn't exactly feel emotionally detached to myself. And at times it was just really difficult to remain emotionally connected. Sometimes it was just kind of hard to be emotionally connected to them. It sometimes I just, it was just hard because they needed me. And to let you all know that I actually had my son when I was 18. I graduated high school in June and he was born in December. So to be honest, there was all the growing up I had to do. I had to grow up with my kids because I had him when I was 18. I had my daughter when I was 20 and my youngest son when I was 21. So 3 kids at 21. And I had to grow up with them. I had to learn with them. Them needing me felt like a lot. Because even if I never said it, I needed someone. I needed help. Like, I guess you could say I was never one of those people who wanted to feel needed. I didn't want people to need me. I liked helping and being the supporting person, but like something I distinctively remember, my grandma, she asked me, she was like, oh baby, you gonna be my lawyer? And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. And she was like, well, you gonna be my doctor? And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to help people. Like, legit, I didn't want to help people in that way. I didn't want to feel needed. Like, I don't know. I can't even tell you all the things that I felt, but like, I didn't want to be depended upon. Like, part of me was like, who allowed me to do this? Like, who allowed me to take care of these lives? Like, can I even keep them alive? And a lot of the time, I just felt like I was being thrown in a blender. And it was like, oh, I have to make sure I'm raising decent human beings while becoming one myself. And at that time, like, I wasn't the best person. I was in a toxic relationship, and it wasn't all him. A lot of it, too, was me. Like, we were just 2 very traumatized, toxic people. And we were young and we didn't know what we were doing. Like, we were not good for each other. And we didn't know how to be healthy people, let alone parents. And so, with that being said, parents dealing with trauma may find it hard to be emotionally connected with their children. They may sometimes feel detached and struggle with staying mentally engaged with their children, especially in high-stress situations. For parents with an inclination of dissociating, shutting down, or becoming numb, this is even more so a difficulty for them. The parents may also have difficulty expressing their feelings and experience complications when self-soothing during stressful moments. This creates a lack of co-regulation with their children. Jana Presley And Caitlin Marie Wilson defined co-regulating as what happens when parents use a calming tone of voice, facial expression, body language, or words to calm their child's distress. A difficulty of self-soothing can also lead to self-neglect, self-harm, suicidal tendencies, acts of violence, and alcohol and substance addictions. They become coping mechanisms to handle the emotional and or physical distress they endure in their everyday lives. This traumatic stress creates two emotional extremes, either feeling too much or feeling too little. Feeling overwhelmed can lead to destructive behaviors to dull the pain they constantly feel inside, while feeling numb can lead to the same harmful behaviors. However, the parents have taken this route to feel stronger emotions that they sometimes feel disconnected from. Parents also have difficulty understanding normal childhood behaviors and experiences. A parent may begin questioning their parenting abilities by comparing the status of their child to another's. For example, because their 2-year-old isn't potty trained, a friend's child they may feel inadequate. Parents may also have a hard time distinguishing if a child is acting their age because they are viewing them through a lens of trauma. Me and a friend actually had this conversation about my kids. I forgot if I asked them to do something. And I was just like, sometimes I wonder if this is how kids are supposed to act. Because I don't really know. And with my oldest son, this is something I really struggled with. When he was young and probably no more than about 6, at the time I would really see him as soft. I was afraid for him, and where we live wasn't kind to boys that didn't act a certain way. He was sweet, innocent, and well-mannered, and it was hard for me to grasp that he was exactly how he should be. Enduring trauma at a young age ripped innocence from me and had given me a very cynical view of life. I actually had my high school homeroom teacher actually told me, he was like, Monique, you're one of the most cynical people I have ever met in my entire life. And I just laughed and I was like, yeah, all right, whatevs. But I really did. And the violence that I witnessed in my home, the sexual encounters that had kind of grabbed a hold of me, and like the suicidal thoughts that whispered to me in the dark when I was by myself, all of this before 14 just kind of made me process it like he was a child that hadn't been hurt yet, and I wanted to protect him. I wanted to teach him how to have thick skin. I really wanted to make sure he was gonna be okay, and I didn't know how. I didn't know the best way to go about it. I didn't used to physically hit him, no, but I think a lot of like my words were just very harsh sometimes, and maybe even just careless. Or like one thing I know for a fact is that like my son will fall, like not like a little oof, like he will fall, have a scraped knee, tears like pouring out of his head, blood. And like, I just kind of look at him and be like, you're okay. And like, he'd look at me and I'm like, you're okay. And he'd be like, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I'd still clean him up, but it was just like, should I not have comforted him in those moments? Like, I looked at him and again, I see the effects of that, because when his dad left, he had tears in his eyes. And I was like, Marcus, are you okay? And he just looked at me and he said, I'm okay. And just walked off. And he wasn't okay, because not long after, I had a teacher call me and was like, this isn't like him. What's going on? Like, he's been throwing stuff and just acting out. This isn't the boy that I've known all this time. Like, what's going on? And it broke my heart, because I had taught him that even when you're hurting, you tell people it's okay and you move on. Jeez. And that wasn't okay. Like, if you're hurt, it's okay to say you're hurting. It really is okay. But I hadn't taught him that. I had taught him that even when you're hurting, you say you're fine. You say you're okay and you keep it moving. That's it. Put a Band-Aid on it and keep it going. That's what I had taught him. I remember explaining to a friend how I wanted to like toughen him up, because I wanted him to be okay. And she was just like, Monique, let him be a child for as long as he can be one. The world will toughen him up. It's up to you to create a safe place for him. He needs that from you. And those words hit me because it made me realize that I never felt like I had a safe place. Like, my home wasn't a safe place for me. The home I was living in wasn't a safe place for me. The home I was raised in wasn't a safe place for me. I didn't have a safe place. So I didn't know what that was. So I had to learn what it meant to be a safe place for a person and to have a safe place for people. It also made me realize that if I tried to impose my idea of who he should be, then I would snuff out his personality. And he has such a beautiful personality. And that he could become someone completely different. And I saw the possibilities of who he could become based off of how I felt, based off of the men in my family, based off the men in his dad's family. I saw who he could potentially become, and I wanted something better for him. Like, I wanted something better for all of my kids. Like, one of the things I always tell them is, because like they used to tell me a lot when they were younger, I want to be like you when I grow up. I would actually be like, no, don't be like me. Like, be better than me. And one of the most proudest moments was when my daughter looked at me and she was like, Mom, I want to be better than you. And like, I had tears in my eyes and I was like, good, because you will be. Like, you're already on your way to being better than me. And that's just important for me. And even though I didn't have the words for it, telling them to be better than me was the best way that I could put into words. Because again, like I said before, I didn't know the word trauma. I just knew like I was hurting. And even though I didn't have the words for it, I didn't want the trauma from my childhood to put him and my other children in the same chokehold that I feel like I was struggling to breathe through. While researching this information, I also discovered that sometimes parents of childhood trauma fall into the behavior of using physical methods in hopes of making a child tougher to survive. As I said before, I didn't use this means on my children. I did make a mistake, though. And I remember hitting my son so hard that he peed on himself, and it nearly broke me. Like, he did something. He was young, and I don't know what he did. I was mad, and like I just hit him way too hard, and it broke my heart. Like, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that to them. Like, I just hitting him that hard. It made me remember like my great grandmother. Like, we went to visit my mom, and my mom lived with her, me and my sister, and I can't remember the full details, but I remember her seeing a bruise either on me or my sister, and she just looked at us, and like she took us to her room, and she was like, take everything off. And like, when she seen the bruises that was on me and my sister, like, she was angry. Like, I remember her yelling at my mom that she needed to do something, because me and my sister didn't live with my mom, we lived with our dad. And I remember her calling my dad and just yelling at him, and was like, if I ever see my grandbabies look like this again, I'm calling the police on you. I'm calling the police on you. You're going to jail. I promise you, you will go to jail. And so hitting him that hard, that's what came to mind. It was just like, I remember that. I remember the other ones like it, but that was probably like one of the worst. And it's just, I could never do that to him. But knowing that I even inflicted, like, just hitting him out of anger, like, it tore me to pieces. And I knew that was the moment that I had to be better. Like, even though I didn't know what better looked like, I knew I had to be better. Like, I had to find what better was, because they deserve better. The love for my children motivated me to learn how to handle them with care. I had to face my past and see the good, the bad, and the ugly, so I can grieve from the trauma and move on to help them. My childhood was not all bad, but there were some very traumatic events that left scars and very deep wounds that affected me, that still affect me, to be honest. In the next episode, we will discuss more about how children cope during these traumatic events. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Monique Thompson, and I'll see you on the next episode on The Legacy Trauma Creates.